Very quickly, I have, early on in the process, Mr. McCallum, or early on this year, I became aware of some of the issues that deal with surety bonds through something that happened back in my district, and spent a little bit of time getting up to speed on the issue, only to find that Mr. Hanna had already done a considerable amount of work on it. So I'd like at this point to yield 4 minutes to Mr. Hanna to ask questions of Mr. McCallum specifically on H.R. 3534.
Well, a great deal, but I've only got 4 minutes. We touched on it, I think, earlier in my testimony. Right now, particularly in the difficult environment, it's very difficult for construction firms. They've been very much impacted in this environment, and so sometimes their balance sheets aren't what they used to be. And there are times whether they are tempted to seek a market that they shouldn't seek or what have you, but they can be preyed upon by individuals who are not licensed at the state level. They are not vetted by the Department of Treasury. They just exist and will sometimes proffer their assets to act as an individual surety. It is a caveat emptor situation, and I think small businesses can't and shouldn't be victimized, and there's a simple solution. And the solution is just make sure that the assets are real, that they are convertible into cash, so if a claim happens, that it can be readily rectified, and that it's in the care and custody of the Federal Contracting Agency and the Federal Government. Currently, under the current FAR, which I believe is fundamentally flawed, the contracting officer shoulders the entire burden, and they're very busy folks who have a lot thrown at them. And this is a burden that they shouldn't necessarily have to share, or at least it should be lightened. Individual surety program has actually been problematic over a number of decades, and they tried to fix it in the FAR in 1989 and 1990. But we're still having problems currently in that regard. And there's plenty of documented cases about that. Again, 3534 is a simple solution that would basically make sure that parties, if they're subs and suppliers, that they have a valid payment bond in the event they're unpaid. And on top of that, individual sureties, if they use the dictates, meaning a public debt obligation of the U.S. government, could actually use the interest off that once the obligation is completed.
I hated retentions, but I mean, whatever the contract was when I started the job, I never assumed that it would change after I finished the job. So if it was 10%, you'd always ask for less, but you never got it and moved on. The fundamental problem with bonding is that it is the one thing that protects all of us against bad actors. And when you let someone in that business, in the bonding business, as an insurance company, you're actually saying, we accept you over them. And if they're no good, you got nothing. And the problem with bonding is it's one of the few areas of law where we rely almost completely in history on the bonding company's desire not to lose money, hence the zero loss ratio. What has happened is people have gotten in the business and they forced other insurance companies to raise the cost of bonding, even though there is implicit there will be no losses, because there actually are losses. The goal is not to limit people's access to bonding. It's to try to keep it so that good actors are in that business. And what that ultimately does is it lets good people who are good intentioned and talented go to work, and it secures those people who have been in this business for years, who have earned their way up through the ladder, who have that $1 million in the bank to do a $20 million job, who have those 300 or 400 employees that know exactly what they're going to do the day they get there. And when you don't protect bonding, you're not protecting the contractor, you're not protecting the government or the taxpayer, and most of all, you're hurting the individual's ability, who's a good contractor, to stay in that business. And that's why I'm, involved in this. Thank you.